And welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am Connor Rebush, your host. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. Phil! Greetings!
It was a good one. We had a good one last week. It was good on paper and it was good in actuality.
It really was.
I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, we had, of course, what Phil is referencing there is last week's UFC Fight Night card, a road show, and therefore, you know what that means, a good show.
They made some effort.
They tried. They tried, and as sometimes happens when you try, it panned out. Beneil Dariush and Arman Tsarukyan fought for top lightweight contention, basically, in the main event. Jalen Turner was a fantastic short-notice replacement for Dan Hooker in the co-main event versus Bobby Green. Deiveson Figueiredo, former flyweight champion, made his bantamweight debut against a top bantamweight. Sean Brady made his comeback after getting embarrassingly TKO'd by one of the lightest hitters in the welterweight division.
If not the sport, pound for pound.
Yeah. And there were even a couple other surprises on this card that I really enjoyed. Like, for example, being impressed with Dustin Stoltzfus is not something I expected to feel this afternoon. Somebody I hadn't even given enough consideration to say that I had written him off, and I was impressed by him. Likewise, even though he didn't get the win, Ihor Potieria impressed me.
Yeah.
All across the card, there were some really cool results. And we're going to go ahead and talk about those. After this segment, we will be getting into the upcoming card. This one at the Apex, but they still tried a little bit. Song Yadong and Chris Gutierrez comprise the main event of that fight night lineup. So that one should be good, at least at the top. We're going to talk about that in segment 2. But first things first, I think the thing everyone cares about, at least the thing we care about most, is the result of Tsarukyan Dariush, which I wouldn't say we called it, but we did mention it. I mean, we picked it correctly in terms of who's going to win. We did make frequent reference to the possibility of what actually happened, which is Tsarukyan just flatlining Dariush very, very quickly in the first round. And that, we didn't say that was going to happen, but we gave it fair consideration.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about how, I don't really like quick KOs.
This was another one of those,
they're just not really very, they're not very interesting.
Because this was supposed to be such a cool fight, right? And instead...
Yeah, and it obviously could have been a cool fight, and we don't get to see any of that. And also because it's not actually particularly enlightening.
Yeah.
But this has been obviously helpful for Arman Tsarukyan's career trajectory, and for all the people who are going to be excited to see him potentially fight Islam Makhachev down the road. It's like, maybe it will only take one more fight for him to get to the belt, rather than the 3 that you would expect.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But on the other hand, it is, as sort of alluded to, it's just something that happens to Beneil Dariush every now and again. Like, you can be like, oh yeah, it was a really nice sequence, knee into punch. It's good shit, looked cool. I mean, it just happens to Beneil every now and again. No, he just gets absolutely laid out cold by someone, and they don't actually have to be particularly good, or even actually all that powerful to do it. I mean, Drakkar Klose very badly hurt him, although again, I guess we can't really talk shit about the dynamism of Drakkar Klose.
No.
For this particular evening's card either.
I'll say this, without fail, all the people who knocked Dariush out are top flight athletes, right?
Yeah.
It's Charles Oliveira, who has just come more and more into his physical prime as he's aged and gone up to his rightful division, but also Alexander Hernandez, Edson Barboza. These are the dudes who knocked Dariush out, and they are all dynamos. And
Ramsey Nijim.
And Ramsey Nijim. Hard punch, not a dynamo, but a hard puncher, certainly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and also quite a while ago, that one. I had forgotten about that one. But, yeah, I mean, you were saying to me before the show that that's sort of a thing you felt people were understating or underrating about Tsarukyan, is that dude's a beast. He is clearly a top flight athlete. And
yeah, I feel like people were crediting him as like a very obviously like a really good grappler and like all round athlete. I don't think people were like rating him high enough on the destruction meter because he's I guess he hasn't finished anyone on the feet at this point quite. He's obviously hurt people on the feet. Like, what did he do to Christos Giagos? But also, I think I said this on Twitter, like, if you watch the, is it Joel Alvarez?
I believe it is Joel. I think he's Mexican.
He is Spanish, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or is he Spanish?
Yeah, sorry, my bad.
Is he
no, I think you're right, I think.
You might be right, actually. Is he? Maybe he's a Spaniard.
I was thinking that. Yeah, he is Spanish. Yeah.
But does he train out of Mexico, or am I just completely? No, he trains out of Spain. I'm racist.
Yep, we're all the same to you.
Anyway, let's move on. We all knew that already.
Yeah, I mean, he's a huge, very tough lightweight, and like thrashing someone into a TKO from top position, like not knocking them down, stunning them, and then dropping some coffin nails on them to close the show, but like getting someone down and then beating them into a TKO is like not something that happens very often at the lighter weight classes.
Yeah. I mean, he showed a shitload of power in his fight with Joaquim Silva as well.
Mm-hmm.
That a similar finishing sequence in that fight as well. Also on the ground, but boy, were they some devastating elbows and hammer fists that he was raining down from that position. Clearly, and when he hits somebody like Gamrot with like a clean body kick, yeah, it's clear Tsarukyan has power and dynamism.
Yeah, so I did think that was very slightly being like underrated in the idea that this was going to be like a long decision. It was like sometimes Dariush just gets out dynamismed, and this guy is very capable of doing it.
Yeah.
But also, like, it's one of those ones where we can look at both this fight and the co-main event, and even though they're short notice KOs, and they don't tell you much, it is at least somewhat gratifying to be able to slot those in to both being KOs which you can understand within the context of the fighters in question. You can be like, this is Beneil Dariush, someone who gets blown out of the water by dynamic athletes anymore, and this is a dynamic athlete. And this is a different kind of quick KO. This is Jalen Turner, a person who pushes people away from range against someone and pushes people out of position and then hits them very hard against someone who tries to use their length and to like bait strikes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was at least like somewhat, even though in both cases I was like, man, these are cool ass fights which have been somewhat ruined by just early.
It's the nerdiest fucking
knockouts.
way to feel about these things, isn't it? Like, I feel like such an annoying. The only appropriate word is, and I have to use the British pronunciation for this. I feel like a twat. When I see a shocking, awesome result like this, and I'm like, no, man. I was really hoping for a good fight, you guys. But it is what it is. I wanted to see the contest here, and yeah, this and the co-main event. Unfortunately, from my annoying perspective, we didn't get to see a lot of the actual back and forth that I want out of a big matchup like this. That being said, just before we move on to addressing the Turner Green, because there truly is, and this is the point, there's not much to say about this main event. I will say that what little we saw did not make Tsarukyan look any worse as a striker.
Nope.
He was still trying to both land and use his jab to open up other strikes against a southpaw. That right there is automatically a good sign.
Yep.
His game looked quite functional. I think the combo he put together was pretty sick. You know?
Yeah. Like transitional offense.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like that's working your way. You know, the jab is what starts it. And, you know, you're able to chain together transitional offense on an awkward southpaw. It's all good stuff.
Jabbing into a right hand, which goes wide, but is left out there to turn into a quick collar tie. Sort of an underappreciated, really staple technique of a lot of MMA strikers. Punching into the collar tie like that. Throwing the knee, which misses, but forces Dariush out of position. And then another, honestly, what should be considered a sort of staple striking technique for MMA, the same side punch after the kick or knee. Which is often so surprising that you don't need the kind of power you can generate when both feet are on the ground for it to have an effect. Something that Lyoto Machida used to land on people all the time. But a great many fighters have, Stephen Thompson has landed it quite a bit, but a wide variety of different stylists have been really effective with that exact idea, and it worked brilliantly for Tsarukyan, and you can't fault him for really like finding his flow on the feet very quickly. And hitting really hard. So hey.
Yep. Maybe this will be the new hotness for 2024. Is that like 2022 to 23 was all about throwing the same side punch and then the same side kick. Maybe 2024 is going to be the kick and or the knee and then the punch.
And then the punch.
Getting crazy with it.
Hey, they both work. So, yeah. Anyway, you know, very impressive showing from Tsarukyan. Just wish we'd seen more of a fight, but who am I to complain other than a twat? How about the co-main event? You've already mentioned Jalen Turner, Bobby Green. Another very sort of characteristic finish that really illustrates what Jalen Turner is good at as a striker.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, as we sort of said, like this is the problem with sort of any fighter, I think, pretty much, almost without exception, maybe not, maybe it is without exception, but any fighter whose first approach to a fight is show me what you've got, is always sort of putting themselves at a disadvantage in MMA. And we've seen this being exploited by fighters, you know, all the way up to, you know, Robbie Lawler and Jose Aldo and so on and so on.
Yeah.
It's that, like, if you are going out there and your first line of defense is not your own offense, you are always putting yourself at risk. Just because, this was sort of what we were worried about, which is that Bobby Green was going to try and, I mean, admittedly, like, Bobby, I think, had the right idea in that he came out, like, very aggressive, aiming out, throwing the shifting punches, going after Turner kind of from the beginning, and I think a more aggressive way than he typically does. I don't think he's not a stupid person. Like, he knew what he should do against a big, short-noticed opponent with a history of gassing. But the problem is, obviously, that, you know, this isn't who Bobby Green is. So, especially, you know, the older, the more likely you are to slip back into more comfortable styles. And, sustained pressure is something that Bobby Green only does when his opponent is like, gassed or hurt.
Yeah. Zane has been making the point for the last couple fights that Bobby Green has been perhaps moving in this direction after a career of full of many frustrating close decision losses. I mean, many of them completely unjustified. Like, I'm sorry, Thiago Moises did not beat Bobby Green. And that's just one. But that Bobby has been starting a lot of his fights lately more aggressively than he used to, trying to force the action. I think that is true to an extent. Like you, I don't think that's a bad idea necessarily against Jalen Turner, but it does not highlight all of the most impressive aspects of Bobby's game. And I don't think he really managed to stick to it, even as short as this fight was.
Oh, I mean, I think his pace was sort of starting to, it tailed off almost immediately, I think.
Yeah, he had to go back to, like, what a normal Bobby Green first round would be like. And
that's just human nature.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. The older you get, the harder it becomes to have a sustained, do something different for any sustained amount of time.
Yep.
I mean, I thought Jalen Turner had, he just looked sharp. There's not much to say about his performance apart from, it was, I thought he was aggressively going for counterpunching against Green's blitzes, which was another one of the things which was sort of made Bobby a bit more passive. I think he did a really good job of making sure he was keeping Bobby upright with the kicks.
Yeah, the kicks are slipping. The kicks are increasingly becoming a vital part of Turner's range striking game. The man has a great high kick. Like it's really very sneaky and surprisingly quick. And of course, it helps that he's a giant, so he can just kind of pick that foot up, and it's already halfway to your face. But yeah, I thought that was those were really excellent, effective weapons. And I actually thought maybe this is just a product of the fact that it's not really Bobby Green's nature he's not a come forward fighter, but I thought Turner's counters off the back foot looked a little more considered than I have seen them in the past. Like a couple nice slip and sidestep, followed almost exclusively by combinations on the counter. And I think that was really what changed Bobby's mind about keeping the pressure on him. Is like he would step in with like a lunging left hand, and Jalen would sidestep and then throw a 3-2, which would, even if only partially land, Bobby Green's like, maybe you shouldn't let that happen continually. That was close. Yeah,
for sure. And I think he was just like, let's do some more Bobby Green stuff. But yeah, as we said before, it was just a dangerous thing to do. If you're gonna slip and have. Bobby Green is a great defensive fighter, but there's a limit to how defensive you can be against someone who's much bigger than you and doesn't throw their punches away. As Jose Aldo showed that against Max Holloway.
Yeah. Go on.
Aldo himself, tried to change the tenor of that fight, but it was just a fundamentally difficult one for him.
Yep.
And we talked about how, Jalen Turner is going to be able to push Bobby Green about a position and then punish him. And true enough, the finishing sequence is, Bobby has a huge, exaggerated slip to his left.
To his right, actually.
Turner throws away to his right, And Turner throws away his left and just then cracks him, and Bobby is by this point fully across he's turning over to the right. The punch is across the plane of his body.
Yep.
He gets absolutely destroyed by it, and then he's put into one of the most disgustingly murderous, I have some stoppages I've seen in some time.
I have some outrage to express about that. I will just say before we get to that the KO to me was strongly reminiscent of the work of another very long and tall and very powerful puncher. It looked like a Vladimir Klitschko KO. This is something he would do to people all the time, is use the jab to get them leaning off to their right, where they thought they were out of the line of the right hand, and then time it to just arc it right over their shoulder and straight across the temple from that angle. Like, this is something that has happened in many, many Vladimir Klitschko fights. When it's not the left hook KOing people, it is like the 1-1-2 and the right hand, and almost always as they try to slip the jab, much like Klitschko often did, Turner here stuck Bobby with the jab, and then it was actually the feinted jab that came next, which got the overreactive slip. This is sort of something we touched on when we talked about Adesanya's last fight, that like moving your head around a bunch is not really the best way to deal with jabs, because more likely than not, a jab might just be a throwaway, which is simply designed to get you to move, and therefore will be followed very, very quickly by the punch it was intended to set up.
Yep.
And so, overreacting.
Yes, and you are moving your, trunk and neck and all this other kind of stuff, and the other person is just extending their hand a bit.
Exactly. You're at a mechanical disadvantage, and for all you know, you were blinded by the first jab. They've already got their feet in position to do whatever's coming next, and then the jab that you're reacting to with your whole body requires zero commitment. They are, in fact, simply waiting for you to outposition yourself. And you are lining yourself up. This happens. If you allow somebody to get into range behind their jab and then continue trying to slip it with, to deal with it exclusively with head movement. If you're in that kind of range, you got to move your feet. You got to get your own jab out there. You have to create an offensive barrier. And a good way to do that is to catch the jabs outright. Catch and parry jabs. That is the best way, I think, to deal with them, or just don't be in range.
Yep.
So but really clean combinations from Jalen Turner, and beautiful rhythm. Like I said, the 1-1-2, but where the second one is just a flicker. And the right hand, follows very, very quickly on its heels. Beautiful rhythm to that finishing sequence. And then the travesty. Kerry Hatley was the referee. And I will say, the UFC has never felt beholden to the athletic commissions. They've often, Dana White has often expressed a very adversarial attitude towards referees. So it's not like it's out of character for people associated with the promotion to talk shit about officials, even when they bring in the officials, as was the case in that Abu Dhabi card. But I did enjoy the fact that Daniel Cormier was like, fuck you, ref. Like, he was in there talking shit about the ref, who was right there while talking to one of the fighters on mic, while talking to Jalen Turner after the fight. He didn't pull any punches in calling that out, and he shouldn't have, because it was... This is the kind of shit you expect to see on some bumfuck regional card. Truly one of the worst late stoppages I can recall ever seeing in the UFC.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of the worst ones. Like, someone put a list of them up on Twitter, and I was like, "Yep, this is one of the worst." It's
like Mir
It's
Carwin
up there with whatever that. What's that?
Like Mir Carwin is maybe one.
Yeah, Mir Carwin. There's like a Dollaway fight, which is particularly grim.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously, outside of the UFC, there's obviously Joe Warren against.
Against
Pat Curran.
Pat Curran, yeah, of course.
But yeah, this is genuinely absolutely atrocious. And yeah, I mean, Cormier has been, rightfully accused by some points in his career of being a bit of a bootlicking family, a bit of a suck up. Man, but yeah. So it was nice to see him just, going after some pretty egregious incompetence.
Yeah. I appreciate that he was incensed by that. And I was glad that Bobby Green appeared to be okay. I mean, but I have no idea what in God's name Kerry Hatley was looking for. It was like he was just not present. Like, Bobby Green got hit on the temple. He did the chicken dance. His legs were completely gone, and then he fell, and then he gets back mounted down on, with his hips on the floor, like on his belly. And he is partially blocking some of the follow-up shots, but is doing absolutely nothing to improve his position. And so even in that circumstance, you'd be like, okay, you know, some refs are like this. Mario Yamasaki, God knows, would have let it go on at least that far. But if you're watching that happen, you are waiting for the shot that is like, it makes it clear he's not going to improve his position at all.
Yeah.
And you're ready to jump in the moment he goes slightly limp. But instead what happens is Kerry Hatley stands there. He's only 2 feet away. He watches Bobby Green get pummeled into unconsciousness, and then he still takes 3 more shots after that before Kerry Hatley finally works up the fucking energy to stop it. A really, really bad stoppage.
Yeah. Genuinely horrific.
And it is exactly this kind of thing that makes us so frequently say we would much prefer early stoppages to late ones.
Yeah, 100%. Like, if Bobby Green went down and Jalen Turner jumps him and landed 1 punch.
Yeah.
And then they just pulled him off. A bunch of people would be like, Bobby Turner's a warrior. Bobby Green's a warrior. He deserves a chance to get back in there. But I would just be like, he probably wasn't getting out of that.
Yeah, did you see his legs? He was fucked up.
Yeah, and he's like, Jalen Turner is a huge man. Like, he was physically not getting up from that. And yeah, he was badly hurt already.
Yeah.
It's fine. 100%. I will say, on a slightly more positive note, is it positive? I guess it is. Jalen Turner didn't miss weight.
Yeah, that's true. Short notice, huge lightweight, didn't miss weight. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I mean, I was genuinely surprised, and I mean, because I saw an interview of him beforehand. He sounded like shit.
I'm sure his brain
before he was going to get on the scales. He was just like slurring, and so I mean, in one way, it's like in one way, like credit to him for putting himself through hell.
Yeah, but also stop doing
to get that win.
You should go up.
Also, stop doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you should go up to welterweight.
At some point, he is going to go up to welterweight, and he's going to realize that he can take shots better, and that he's like way faster than anyone else up there,
and that he is still quite big and more than hard hitting.
He's
6'3".
He was visibly like a lot taller than light heavyweight Daniel Cormier.
Yeah. He's 6'3", man. He would not be too small for welterweight.
And I mean, that's 6'3" is a large welterweight. Like,
absolutely. 6'3" is big for a middleweight.
Yes.
Yeah, with that classic puncher's build, the long limbs, the big hands, tall guy, broad-shouldered, like, the only concern would be that welterweight is classically a bit of a wrestler's division, and that is something Jalen struggles with somewhat, but he'd be a lot quicker, and he's just going to have to.
But it's also like much less of a wrestler's division than it ever has been.
That's true. And he's just going to have to eventually. He's 28. There is credit to him for not missing weight here when it seemed really likely that he should, but he's already missed twice before. There's just no way he can do it.
And it just
forever.
can't be good for him.
No, it's obviously not. He probably did as much damage to himself on a 3-week weight cut as he did to Bobby Green in over the course of a 3-week finishing sequence. Like he probably did just as much permanent damage to himself to get that result.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, that's the main and co-main event. Both a bit disappointingly quick, but certainly both very impressive performances for the people who won them, which should set them up for bigger things. I mean, 2 guys who are kind of have for a while been kind of knocking at the door. These look like valuable highlights for their careers. Let's take a break on that note. We are, of course, going to get back to this card. We have to talk about Figueiredo Font. I want to talk about Sean Brady, Kelvin Gastelum, and maybe highlight some of the other little surprises in the undercard. But first, we have to talk about next week's main event, That is Song Yadong versus Chris Gutierrez at the Apex. After this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. As promised, we are moving on to our preview of next week's main event, Song Yadong, Chris Gutierrez. And, you know my new rule, Phil. It's worked out pretty well so far. I'm going with my gut.
Excellent.
My picks are becoming, ironically, since I'm going with my gut, less sweaty, less try hard, less over intellectualizing, but admittedly hairier than they were before. I'm going with my gut, and I'll show you how useful this is, right? I looked at this matchup, Song Yadong, Chris Gutierrez, and my gut said, Yadong. My gut, the joke is, I don't think the joke is funny anymore, but my gut really likes it still. My gut said, Song Yadong. You take the hyper athletic, like, for all of the fact that he has sort of failed to develop and pan out as we hoped, at least so far, the man is still clearly one of the best athletes in the entire organization. He is an absolute monster. He's incredibly fast. He's incredibly powerful. He's incredibly durable. I mean, he has it all, physically speaking. And then my brain entered into the conversation, right? My gut said, Song Yadong, don't even think about it. Brain didn't listen. And starts thinking about the style matchup, which is the kind of shit my brain loves.
Mm-hmm.
And the style matchup is, I think, pretty good for Chris Gutierrez.
Yep.
You know, a couple of key factors. Chris Gutierrez, very technical fighter, unusually comfortable at fighting off the back foot for an MMA fighter, and pretty good at it. I mean, the guy has good defensive footwork. He uses his jab well. He's shockingly good at kicking without having to move forward. And then that pairs, that seems pretty complementary to the fact that Song Yadong's, I think, maybe most critical flaw is that he cannot cut off the cage. Something he has just completely failed to learn. He wants to be this like aggressive counterpuncher, but he tends to just sort of follow people around. And, you know, even like Ricky Simone, who has really come a long way, but nobody thinks of Ricky Simone first when they're thinking of elite striker. Just basically like outmaneuvered Song Yadong for most of the rounds of their fight. He just couldn't keep him cornered. And so, you know, stylistically, that looks like there's some room for Chris Gutierrez to work there.
Sure. Yeah, you go back and you watch Song Yadong, Kyler Phillips.
Yeah.
Just, you know, Yadong just chasing Phillips around the perimeter of the octagon, just swinging huge punches at him, being totally planted every single time, and then eventually walking into counters and, you know, set and shots that Phillips sat down on and all this other kind of stuff. And you'd be like, man, what if Phillips then added like a real low kicking game in with this stuff? And what if Song Yadong looked completely incapable of checking low kicks? Like his stance, his reaction to them,
which he kind of is,
just countering them or backing away. And you're like, man, sure, yeah, this is actually like a good chance to be picking like the sneaky, clever technician.
Yeah, and we think Song Yadong is quite susceptible to low kicks. You know, to put a point on it, like he just doesn't check them very well. He tends to be very planted. He tends to be ready to move his head, but not his feet, or lift a leg to check, or get out of the way. Yeah, and it's like Kyler Phillips is not as good a technician as Chris Gutierrez, but you know what he is? He's
athletic.
Much better athlete than Chris Gutierrez. You know who's not a much better athlete than Chris Gutierrez? Probably on a par with him. Julio Arce.
Yeah.
Who also fought Song Yadong. Another clever technician. Really, more so than Gutierrez, like a really flexible stylist.
Yep.
There's a lot of different ways that Arce can sort of game plan himself into fighting. Had a lot of options. Really could have worked Song Yadong with the technical edge, and he got sparked out.
Mm-hmm.
He just got flattened by the super athlete. So I'm going with my gut.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's the feeling I have.
Yeah. So when this got announced, I was getting Gutierrez mixed up with Martinez.
Jonathan Martinez,
his teammate.
Yeah.
Yes, who is also a huge, like a big low kicker. But like the difference between Chris Gutierrez and Jonathan Martinez is that Jonathan Martinez is a hoss.
Yeah.
You look at that man's thighs; they are ginormous. He is again, like we talked. He had his fight with Adrian Yanez, and we were like, well, Adrian Yanez also doesn't check low kicks. But I don't think Martinez likes being in punching exchanges for that long, and Yanez can be aggressive and drown him and so on. And then Martinez low kicked him twice and crippled him. It's just like, oh shit,
shredded every fucking sinew in his leg with a couple kicks. Yeah,
and I don't think Gutierrez can do that. He can, as you said, he is probably in many ways a better technician than Jonathan Martinez.
Yeah.
But he's doing what Martinez does through attrition and through being clever and through piling it up, piling it up over time. Jonathan Martinez had Adrian Yanez badly hurt right from the beginning. I think there's just too much of a firepower disparity here for me. And it's just no one has easy fights against Song Yadong. They just don't. Even
Ricky Simone got dropped by him in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has a tough fight with him.
And got knocked out.
Yeah.
Even Corey Sandhagen is well remembered as a fight where Sandhagen is outmaneuvered him and TKO'd him due to cuts, right? But
still got
even
hurt.
He got hurt pretty bad. And he's Corey Sandhagen. He's a very big and B extremely good fighter.
Yep.
So yeah, that we were talking a bit before about the fight between Pedro Munoz and Gutierrez, and apart from the fact that this is maybe just the greatest performance of Pedro Munoz's career,
it's up there, man. If it's the last really solid win he gets, it'll be a tremendous last hurrah because it is recapturing his old intensity and aggression and discipline, just a really rock solid pressure performance.
Yeah, just synthesized all the things that he'd learned when he was trying to be technical. With his old aggression and
shit, even brought his wrestling back out. He did it all. It was a really great showing.
Yeah, just sensational stuff. But also, right at the beginning of that fight, Chris Gutierrez backs up, and then Pedro Munoz just bursts out and just knocks him down. Like a left hand. I'm like, man, if Pedro Munoz is doing that to you, Song Yadong is going to punch your head through the cage.
Yep.
He is bigger, he is faster, he is... so all the stylistic caveats aside, I kind of have to pick Song Yadong.
He also, Gutierrez also got hurt early, if I recall correctly, by Dana Batgerel.
Oh my god.
Who is kind of hapless as a technical fighter, really prone to making the same mistake over and over again, but is a aggressive and is a big puncher. And it just seems like a pattern that if you are an aggressive, hard hitter, you're going to get at least a chance to hurt Gutierrez early. He seems to recover quite well, at least physically. He didn't get knocked out by Pedro. He didn't get knocked out by Batcherel. Batcherel, he came back to KO himself, in fact. But against Munoz, he just didn't get back into the fight. Also, like, Song Yadong is clearly the hardest hitter of all these guys. You know what I mean? Like, it's the Arce fight. He fought Julio Arce. They had a really interesting technical showdown. And then at some point, the guy who knows all the rules and all the tricks lost to the guy who simply doesn't adhere to the rules. He just break your game when you have that kind of athletic edge. It's cheating. How many times do I have to say it? He's cheating in there. You can't beat him because he's cheating.
Yeah. Well, that to be said, there's obviously a path for Gutierrez to win.
Yes.
As we said, Yadong looks very vulnerable to the low kicks. I mean, he's so aggressive about countering them. I do wonder whether he'll scare Gutierrez off.
Yeah.
Because that's certainly what Munoz was able to do.
Munoz is a much better pressure fighter, but perhaps less imposing. One way or the other, he kept enough aggression on Song on Gutierrez that, his best weapons were actually pushed out of his game.
Mm-hmm. But should he have like an open, sort of open space neutral fight with him? There's a decent chance that Gutierrez can just cripple him especially over the course of 5.
Yep.
Yeah, can't pick it to happen. I think Song probably just finishes him sometime within the first 2. I think.
Yep, that sounds about right. I don't have anything else to say, just because, pretty quick breakdown there. I don't have anything else in depth to say about anything else in this card. I just want to point out that I'm very, very fond of the matchup between Junyoung Park and Andre Muniz.
Why? You're mean.
What?
You're a mean person.
It's because I'll tell you why. Because I love Junyoung Park.
I know. I know you do.
That's why I like it. He's my boy, and he's gonna win.
Yeah, it's gonna be horrible.
We're gonna get to see Junyoung Park take somebody down and beat them up from top position. That's like one of the coolest things he does.
He's a very cool fighter.
That's all I have to say. It's a pretty
Andre Muniz, was doing super well. Thought he was super good, and then had 2 incredibly dispiriting losses. And you're just thrilled at the opportunity for him to get also destroyed by an extremely violent turtle man.
Yeah, well, and also just somebody who's like, "What if I grapple with you?" And then his whole game just implodes. Yeah, no, I like it.
Bastard. Anthony Smith, after getting showing no ability to deal with the low kicks of Johnny Walker, now being given the old Roundtree, also seems mean.
Yeah.
But, whatever. At least he's not in the main event.
Yeah. At least he's not in the main event. We have a bantamweight main event, which is very good. And, that one to me is more cruel than anything else. Cause poor Chris Gutierrez, he gets a fucking win over Frankie Edgar. Then he loses to Pedro Munoz. Admittedly, not a good performance. He got completely shut out. But then, we were saying, oh, poor him. Cause his last booking, he was buried on the prelims. And now we're going all the way the other way. He's suddenly in a main event again. But it seems like a really cruel one, just designed to establish a hard ceiling on his career. I don't know. I hope he wins. It'll be cool.
It's a pretty viciously booked card in general. I'm not gonna lie.
It really is. Yeah.
I mean, Nasrat Hakparas, Jamie Malarkey. Nasrat Hakparas is a flawed fighter. That is for sure. But also, that's gonna be ugly.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, going with the cheater, Song Yadong. That's the pick. The gut says so, and that means it's time to move on. When we come back, more from Dariush versus Tsarukyan, namely its undercard. We had Deiveson Figueiredo making his bantamweight debut against Rob Font, and was not the result we picked, but the way it played out, had we known a couple of key details, I think we would have picked it very confidently to pan out the way it did. We're going to talk about that after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, so like I was saying, we picked this one for Rob Font conditionally, right?
Mm-hmm.
We picked against Deiveson on the basis that either his durability has actually gone, or despite the possibility that moving up in weight might very well have helped him recover his, what used to be an unbelievably solid chin, that his confidence in his ability to eat shots was gone. These were our feelings that I think really, really, more than anything else, made us pick Rob Font here. However, we said, if Deiveson can eat the shots of Rob Font and just decide to punch with him, if he doesn't care too much about getting hit, we kind of know how those fights can go for Rob Font at this point. And from the first moment in this matchup, as it played out, from the first moment that I saw Deiveson Figueiredo willingly trade jabs with Rob Font, and Rob Font get rocked back onto his heels, I was like, okay. I could have skipped the rest of the fight. I just knew. It's Aldo. It's Cheeto. I know this kind of fight for Rob Font. It's not a good look.
Mm.
That's kind of what it was. It was just poor Rob Font was my primary feeling. Like, I'm happy for Deiveson. Cool to see him as a player at bantamweight. Great win. But goddamn, is this one of the more just brutally repetitive patterns I've ever seen in a fighter's career at this point.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this one because some of the stuff that we said beforehand was just sort of wrong in the context of this fight, because we were like, apart from anything else, we were like, what Deiveson needs to do? He needs to force exchanges. If he doesn't, he's going to be just dropping numerically behind Rob Font, but also and he's going to be, and Rob is going to be able to just force him out of position, and rack up points on him. And and similarly to like the people who are saying like, oh, Deiveson Figueiredo's back, he's completely recovered himself. I myself looking at this and I was like, was this a good performance?
I mean, he looked very awkward.
He won almost. I think he won every round. I'm pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure he did. Let's check MMA decisions while you continue.
Yeah. Also, on the only scorecard which matters, Phil McKenzie's. I think he did. I cannot honestly remember, but yeah, one thing this was not, 100% wasn't, was the concerted pressure performance of his first fight against Brandon Moreno. This
Absolutely
was
not, yeah.
Figgy backing up to the fence, circling around, and occasionally just having a genuinely startlingly empty performance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, none of these rounds were. I don't think any of the rounds were difficult to score, but it was very much. I've mentioned this fight before as one of these examples. It was like Bisping Silva. Wanderlei Silva, where Bisping was just like outscoring Wanderlei, and then Wanderlei would like land one flurry that like visibly stunned him towards the end of the round. You'd be like, oh well, that's it. That's that round done then.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like, I didn't think like this didn't look like prime Deiveson Figueiredo to me.
No, on that point, I agree. It was certainly not the style of prime Deiveson, as you said. Super negative, very evasive. Really seems to have still. This is him post the lessons learned in the Moreno series. More defensive in general, looking to be more of a counterpuncher, while still not really having great defense, like just kind of most of the time having to resort to either moving his feet and taking himself totally out of countering position in the process, or just punching with Rob Font, throwing at the same time as him and hitting harder. And then also really relying on his wrestling as like a way out of getting pressured. That's a good idea against Rob Font in particular. But, on the other hand, like, we saw Rob Font fight another past his best, too passive former fearless knockout puncher in Cody Garbrandt.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about this as well.
And he did just successfully pile up on him. So there was a little more, something about Deiveson's performance was more frustrating for Rob to deal with, because as much as this was not, I think, a great showing from Deiveson, it did, I think, successfully neutralize all of Rob Font's game. Like, he barely jabbed. After trading some and getting hurt in the exchange, he pretty much stopped using his primary punch. Like, if this was him getting convinced against his better instincts, then it is a bad sign for him, considering that he fearlessly kept to his jab throughout 10 rounds of brutal punishment against Aldo and Vera. So I guess the question is, how much of that is the decline of Rob Font, losing a worse version of his losing style matchup? How much of it is maybe something we haven't picked up on yet about Deiveson that sets him apart from the likes of Cody Garbrandt?
I mean, for me, it was pure foot speed, and like the fact that Deiveson is in fact like just an instinctive fighter.
Yeah.
Right? Is that does Deiveson Figueiredo have good defense? No.
No.
But when something was coming at him, he would move his head, often just like, turning it to the side to get his chin out of the way, and then he would just back away as fast as humanly possible. And Rob Font would just be kind of compelled to keep slowly trotting after him. And yeah, to me, it was that like Garbrandt kept trying to recreate sort of boxing exchanges with Font, where he was just behind on them because he didn't have any establishing tool to start them off with, because he didn't have a jab. And so everything he did was sort of in response to Rob Font's jab, and he kept being sort of dictated from that perspective. What Figueiredo did was he was just like, every time Font came forward and tried to attack me, it was just like, no, I'm not attacking this exchange. No, I'm not attacking this exchange. No, I'm not. And then every like seventh exchange, he would just go for a simultaneous counter.
Yep. Keep chasing me. Keep chasing me. Sometimes I'm going to take you down when you chase too hard. Sometimes I'm going to let you have the exchange you've been chasing and just win it. Brutishly.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it was partially, it was a few things that like, Font, I think, he just doesn't have those defensive instincts that when he's piling up offense on people, he's not really...
No.
He doesn't really react to what's coming back at him very well, which is why he's so easy to take down and why he's
Yep.
Can be countered so badly when he's coming in, is that he's simply thinking about forcing people out of position, and he's just,
he's coming
forward with his head in the same place.
Great with an initiative, because he's one of these fighters who pretty much gets locked into the combination he wants to throw the moment he starts throwing it. Yeah.
Yep. And he just doesn't, Figueiredo, like, leaning backwards and sprinting away is maybe not the best defense, but it is better than simply coming forward into the exchange and throwing on the understanding that your opponent is going to back away.
Yeah. I mean, that was what he did for most of the fight. He just denied Rob Font exchanges.
Mm-hmm.
Just said no.
I mean, again, like, there were points, like, particularly in the second round, when I was just like, this is bad. Like, this is going to get you. This is not smart. This is going to get you in trouble at some point. Like, it was just a long period of him doing capital T, fuck all.
Uh-huh.
And then, he just managed to pick up, like, a few punches at the end of the round, and that was it. And he'd won that round too. But, like, again, I think, this has happened to Rob Font enough that you can now be like, well, he's just going to have to learn to, either he's going to have to learn, like, defense, or potentially, like, cage cutting or something.
I'll tell you what, 36-year-old Rob Font ain't suddenly developing a complete defensive striking game.
No, but again, you just need something.
Yeah, but I think this is just who Rob Font is, basically. I mean,
I think more than likely it is just who Rob Font is at this point. But yes, I am unconvinced that it doesn't really look like Deiveson Figueiredo is back to me. I still would like to see him against, I think Jan is the obvious fight for him, right?
That's a great matchup.
I mean, it's for, in obvious ways that, like, it was the violent champion versus champion fight we never got. Jan has been struggling with this kind of stuff against, like, a much better, much bigger version of this against, like, Sean O'Malley and so on. It would be cool to see him, see how he's improved against that, if at all. Yeah, just do the Jan fight. It'd be fantastic. And it would just be violent as hell.
And it would be very informative, I think.
Yeah.
It would cement I think you're on the money. I mean, I think your instinctive feeling is pretty good that this is not a particularly rejuvenated version of Deiveson Figueiredo. I still think it's possible we could see him. It's possible we could see him flourish a bit at bantamweight, because at least he took shots well when he had to. He certainly looked very quick.
Yeah. It's definitely much better than I was fearing.
And he didn't look small. Is the other thing. I don't believe that.
I was never expecting him to look small. That would be crazy.
No, but I mean, we looked at the numbers on paper, and it was like, oh, Rob Font's 3 inches taller. He's got 3.5 more inches of reach. We talked about these. I don't think he is 3 inches taller than Deiveson Figueiredo. Seeing them in the cage together is like, maybe he's an inch taller than him. They look pretty much.
Yeah.
Rob Font's got maybe thicker legs. They look pretty similar in
size.
Yeah.
He's got a few inches on him, but Figueiredo was a fucking huge flyweight.
Yeah, he looked perfectly physically well suited for the bantamweight division. So,
and he can fight Jan or Jonathan Martinez or the winner of Song Yadong and Chris Gutierrez. Whatever. I'm down for all these fights.
Yep. I think the Jan one makes a lot of sense.
I think that seems like the natural one, right?
Yeah,
that's a fantastic fight to put on, like, a pay-per-view. You can have it as, like, you can put it anywhere. You can put it as the action-packed opener. You can put it as third lot on the card, like, anywhere. Just it's a banger.
All right, couple quick hits then for the rest of this card. Sean Brady, Kelvin Gastelum. Kelvin Gastelum is back to the guy he's always been. he's back to...
Well, we were talking about this. We were talking about this, and I was horribly fading Kelvin, right? And then you were like, but I don't want to make a pick because I'm scared.
I did say I was scared, and I think I let that bastard Zane Simon sucker me into picking Kelvin Gastelum even. I think I was completely...
You guys are
dumb. I'm a fucking idiot. You know, what can I say?
I was like, but I don't think Kelvin Gastelum's good at grappling anymore.
You were right. You know, if only you had told me in clear terms, expecting Kelvin Gastelum, who has basically not fought a decent wrestler since moving up to middleweight, and who's only...
he fought Chris Weidman and then lost horribly.
Yeah.
He also fought Jacare, who broadly stood up with him and robbed him. Did he rob Jacare? I can't remember.
I don't remember anything.
And what was the other one? Oh, getting instantly submitted.
Jack Hermanson just heel hooked him. Yeah.
Jack Hermanson. Yep.
Yeah, so not a lot of great grappling looks since moving up to middleweight. Still the same exact dysfunctional striking game that he ever had. But I was still like, you know, he's a good scrambler, at least he was, and hard to take down from the outset, at least he was. And certainly, if I was going off the Chris Weidman one, I would not have expected him to get absolutely ragdolled as badly as he did here. It's not like Weidman just effortlessly took him down and didn't have to fight for position or anything. He was better than he was here. This was bad.
Yeah. I think it's one of those ones where it's like, all these people have been asking, quite justifiably, they've been like, come on, Kelvin, go back down to welterweight for years, because he's obviously a welterweight.
Yeah.
But the obvious problem is that, like, he's had no skill development in that time.
Yep.
He's the same person who fought Rick Story. He's just older.
Yeah, he's just older. Mm-hmm. Not quite as shockingly fast.
Yeah, because, I mean, to me, the more surprising, the most, surprising and damning part of this fight is not that he got taken down and smushed on the floor, because, again, in some ways, I was sort of expecting that, but just because I don't know why it was, because
it's
just the fact that, I've just... What's that?
I guess that's the reason, right? Because you're so smart.
I mean, to be honest, I've just always horribly faded Gastelum after
good instincts.
The Till fight.
Oh, yeah.
Where I was like, oh, yeah, he can just pressure Darren Till and he can beat him up, and...
he just didn't do any of that.
And he just didn't do any of it. And I was like, oh, no, he's not. He's just the same person. He'd just lose to Neil Magny again, wouldn't he? And... yeah, I mean, so much of his career has been like that. He's not actually hard to take down. He's just very explosive once you take him down.
Yeah.
And I was like, is this a good thing to be against someone who could, who quite significantly out-wrestled Michael Chiesa? Like, who's an actually good grappler and wrestler?
Yeah.
And it's just so much of it has been, again, in the other sense of the one that we were talking about earlier. It's about, what do your, show me what you got, this kind of element of it, is that he would allow the takedown and then escape from what the person was doing.
Yeah.
And that Weidman fight was essentially that, Weidman was getting takedowns on him, and then Gastelum was getting out of them. And then the period of Gastelum getting out of the takedown just went down and down and down, because every time he'd try some, crazy explosive trick to get out of what was happening, and it would just work less and less, and it would tire him out more and more, and eventually he got like arm triangle,
which essentially happened in miniature in this fight.
Yeah,
he got taken down early. He scrambled out of back control, got on top position, but couldn't keep Sean Brady down. Not a controlling fighter in any respect, Kelvin Gastelum. And then the next takedown lasted longer, and then it was just one takedown per round, basically, for the remainder of the fight. More concerning than that, because when you pitch it that way, it sounds like a pretty typical thing, is the fact that in the brief portions of this fight was on the feet, Gastelum was also getting fucking laced by Sean Brady's punches.
that was what I was going to say before I got diverted by myself. I was like, yeah, he was getting beat. He was getting dropped. He got dropped basically, right, in round one.
It was a shot simultaneous with a caught kick. It wasn't like a knockdown.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did get clipped hard on the chin. He got hit really clean with a lead right hand shortly before that. He was just getting outstruck. And I'm sure the threat of the takedown he had just escaped prior to these exchanges was part of that. But he was overthrowing. His defense was as bad as ever. He looked slower to react than he used to as a welterweight, which I suppose is to be expected. But
yeah, he's just been fighting slow people this whole time. But yeah, I mean, I think so. This is one of the things is that people have been saying like, oh yeah, he should go down to welterweight. But obviously, one, everyone down there is faster.
Yep.
Two, everyone down there is still bigger than him.
Yep.
But like three, his main route to victory. I mean, victory is a very hard thing to say because he hasn't been winning. But like, he's basically just been riding his chin to wins. And once he's actually dehydrated, like, what does Kelvin Gastelum, and the hand speed is not so shocking for the division.
Yep.
What does Kelvin Gastelum have to offer?
He needs his durability and he needs a speed edge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this was another one like Figueiredo Font, where like the moment you saw a few minutes of the first round, you just knew how it was going to go. Somebody was like, I don't know that it's that clear. Somebody on Twitter was saying, I don't know that it's that clear cut yet. Someone was like, barring a miracle comeback. And like, Kelvin Gastelum has never won a comeback in his life. You know, he has two kinds of fights: wars and losses.
Yeah.
That's it. He's either in a war
and brutal knockouts of old people.
Well, yeah, that too. If you give him a man with a walker, and a pretty solid life insurance policy, who's really thinking about what he's going to leave behind, somebody at that point in his life, Kelvin Gastelum maybe is still capable of dusting them, but yeah, it's just like has always been such a purely physically dependent fighter that it just didn't have any kind of physical edge here. I don't want to take away too much from Sean Brady, who I thought looked phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I'm really pleased to see him come back so confident and so sharp and have such a great 3-round performance. I mean, obviously easier because he was hardly tested. So you're not going to gas out even if you're prone to it if it's all one-way traffic. Unless you're a really comically, Gleason Tebow type of fighter.
Mm-hmm.
But, he had a really dispiriting result in his last fight. Took a while off, came back, and he looked super confident and fired up and just looked great.
Yeah, cool submission. Obviously, this was the one super grappling heavy fight in an otherwise, I mean, it wasn't actually, but it was, it was probably the least dramatic fight on the card.
Yeah.
And so obviously we got the downside of a live crowd, which is all the idiots getting out their phones and booing and shit. But this, I mean, he crushed Gastelum.
And finished him. I mean, that is, if you're going to dominate somebody this badly, you should be working towards a finish, and he was. He was breaking him down, and he got there.
Yep. Yeah, it was just an ass whooping.
Yep. Clay Guida is, in fact, old, and Joaquim Silva is, in fact, not. So
you know what? I thought Clay Guida looked exactly the same as Clay Guida. It was really weird.
He has looked exactly the same. Clay Guida is still good. I mean, he just doesn't beat fighters in their prime, but he's still shockingly good.
Yeah. Also, this was like the crowd was going nuts for this, and it reminded me of the special charisma of Clay Guida.
Yeah.
Is that, because he's trying so hard.
Yeah.
And he's just throwing everything into it, and everyone was like roaring at every like takedown or thing that he got out of. I was just like watching it. I was like, man, this guy isn't actually doing very much.
No.
Like,
but you can tell the whole time you are also like, he's an animal. He's just not quitting. He just keeps going.
Yeah. But like the actual level of activity of real offense and things that he was trying to do compared to and the crowd was, as I said, going insane compared to the, crushing dominance of Sean Brady just fucking Kelvin Gastelum up.
Yeah.
The difference between these two things. And you're like, mostly he's just like driving him into the fence.
Yeah.
Desperately trying for a double leg, which he isn't getting. He hasn't done anything in like this entire round.
But he's doing it after getting plastered with a big punch, so you're impressed. You're like, wow, he's still going for it.
Yeah. And that's, but also, I wasn't bored.
No.
And yeah, it was just like, he's just got that sort of charisma and will that at the end he was bouncing up and down looking like he thought he could have won that, and obviously he hadn't. But
the crowd also thought he won, which I found comical. Like,
it's very funny.
They were really upset that the decision went to the guy who clearly got the better of him.
Just did all the meaningful things in the fight, apart from one super cool slam. But yeah, the weirdest thing about it was that it just looks. People were like, I myself was like, he's an old man, he's not going to win this. It just looks exactly like Clay Guida. It just looks exactly like an old Clay Guida fight. If you just superimposed him over his younger self, I couldn't have told you the difference.
Yeah, hair's a little thinner, maybe,
Yeah.
That's
just like if you just pasted the older one into the younger man's body or somehow like that, I couldn't have told you the difference. He just moved around as much. He didn't tire as much. He got stunned, but then Clay Guida used to get stunned all the time. It's like, man, he just looks the same.
You should expect no less of a 2-time Tequila Cazadores Spirit Award winner.
Very true.
That's a little tidbit I happened to see just now on his wiki.
Yeah. To be honest, one of the as every year goes by, that one slips down the rankings of the most embarrassing UFC sponsorships ever.
You get it though, because of fighting spirit, but also tequila is a spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I understand.
Get it?
Thank you, Connor.
Get that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I will say, we're going long here, but whatever. There was a lot of good stuff on this card. I was both pleased and frustrated by Joaquim Silva as well. Obviously, we just picked him for straight up youth and athleticism, which I think were the decisive factors. But he was also surprisingly patient and considered in this performance.
Yes.
I think he very successfully extended himself against somebody who still clearly has unbelievably good cardio. And I thought his defensive footwork looked a lot better. His footwork in general looked a lot better, and like he was actually putting some thought into why he was standing the way he was standing, what angles he was trying to get to. It looked like a bit of an upgrade for Joaquim Silva, which I like to see. But boy, would a jab have gone a very, very, very long way for him in this fight. Because despite all that movement, he just when Clay Guida decided he was going to run forward, Joaquim Silva just couldn't. He just didn't have anything there to stop him other than just getting into an exchange. Yep. And buddy, if Clay Guida is standing in front of you, just bobbing his head up and down, and then fully running forward when he wants to close the distance, just stick a jab in his chest.
Also, it's Clay Guida. He's he's winging his hardest punches in front of him, which does look scary until you realize that they are carving through the air 8 inches in front of his chest.
Yeah, that he's doing the fucking freestyle stroke. Essentially swimming across the distance between you. Yeah, a jab to the chest, man. I mean, honestly, more likely than not, Guida is going to duck his chin right into it. It will also interfere with him running into a level change, and it will stop him in his tracks. That's what a jab does. It's why it is both the best way to set up attacks and also the best defense. It's a barrier. And Joaquim Silva looked like he retooled his approach, but he didn't have what should be, I think, the fundamental element of that kind of approach, or really any approach. I mean, I'm not going to be turning any heads by saying that I think this MMA fighter should jab more, but another one. Last things, just a couple quick hits I want to mention. Dustin Stoltzfus gets, I don't know that he's going to get the Rebush chalice for things Connor Rebush likes to see at this year's Handies, but he's going to get a little honorary one here right now because of all the fighters I have seen, all the orthodox fighters completely fail to use their jabs against a southpaw. I did not expect that Dustin Stoltzfus, notably slow and clumsy, forgettable middleweight, would be one of the few to actually do it.
He's a better open stance striker than Alexander Volkanovski. That's right. You heard it here on Heavy Hands.
You heard it here. No, he was like just getting nailed with every shot. He's just super slow, Dustin Stoltzfus. He could not get out of the way, but he did ultimately figure out that all Punahele Soriano was doing was winging overhand lefts. And he did stop getting hit by them. And he kept his jab in Soriano's face. And, I thought like a shockingly solid performance. Like Soriano is stylistically should not be that difficult to beat, but this is one of those physical golf matchups. And Stoltzfus stuck around long enough to actually win the style matchup that Soriano's physicality should have sort of overshadowed. So credit to him for that. The other one is Ihor Potieria, another fighter that I had never thought about enough to even say that I've written him off. Just didn't think he was very good. I picked Rodolfo Bellato to beat him, which he ultimately did in the most unsatisfying way possible, because Ihor Potieria went to between his last fight and this one, he went to the Julian Erosa school of sick counterpunching that your defense isn't really quite good enough to actually do flawlessly, but is still pretty awesome. He was moving around a ton. He was slipping and countering with uppercuts, which were setting up hooks. He was standing with his back to the cage and slipping and rolling shots and coming back with full-on combinations. And he was busting Bellato up with these counters. He hurt him. He went for the finish, and then he got tired. And Bellato, the better physical fighter, cheated his way to a comeback win.
Yep.
But hey,
how dare he?
Honorary recognition to Ihor Potieria for doing something different, making some improvements, and honestly, for the first time since I've seen him in the UFC, like making me pay attention to him positively. I'm actually kind of looking forward to seeing what he can do in the future after that. I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he looked okay against Ulberg as well. I remember thinking, like, he's not without some talent. And also, I find him just, like, genuinely a little bit touching.
Yeah.
As a fighter, because after his Shogun thing, where he was, he was like, no, normally I do my thing where I shoot the person after I've beaten them, but I didn't do that. I fired it into the air. I waved my hand to say no and fired my gun into the air. And obviously everyone recognized that was what was happening, because everyone knows my Ihor, the Duelist Potieria's famous signature finishing move.
Yep. Don't fear me.
And that I was changing it for this situation.
Don't fear me, right, guys? Don't fear me. Fear the...
They didn't see me pointing at Shogun and then looking like I was shooting him. Like, they saw me fire my imaginary gun into the air. They know and it was just like, man,
Nobody
You
knows.
just look like you were shooting him.
Nobody knows.
It is
who you
adorable.
are.
It is adorable that you think anyone knows your like,
Yeah.
your special like gravedigger style, like victory pose.
Very earnest, very,
Yeah.
and also the fact that it was such a no-win situation for him. He got this booking, a fight, like a complete waste, honestly, of Shogun's last shreds of name value. A performance that I think everybody picked Potieria except the what's the word I'm looking for? The malignantly nostalgic.
The people who like for every run of his UFC career were just like Rampage by left hook KO.
Yeah. Everybody who knew anything or who had watched his last several fights was like, okay, yeah, I'm just picking against Shogun regardless of who he's fighting. He's a corpse. And so just a whole waste, and then Potieria gets the win. It's incredibly unsatisfying already, and then this is supposed to be such a huge moment for this forgettable guy, and everyone just boos him. It's like, fuck you for winning a fight that the UFC, it's entirely their fault because Shogun would have lost to literally anybody at this point. Boo! Yes. So yeah, he definitely
And
earned...
he's like, let me show my respect. Not shooting him with my imaginary gun. Everyone's like, what is he doing, you son of a bitch? Why are you shooting Shogun?
Show my respect with it.
I wasn't shooting him.
A subtle variation of my well-known post-fight celebration. Yeah. Anyway, this is the first time I've ever seen him in a fight where I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe he's kind of good. He's got something here.
But it's also, it's light heavyweight, so.
Yeah, just the big beefy guy won.
To be a big stupid athlete, yeah.
Yeah. What are you going to do? All right. Well, that's more than enough for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. A lot of fights to talk about. Next week's card looks like a couple dunkers. But, hey, there's some name value as far as Apex cards go, so I'll take it. Of course, after that, coming up in 2 weeks, we have UFC 296. They fucking did it. Colby Covington, another undeserved title shot against defending champion Leon Edwards, but that is a solid card. We have Alexandre Pantoja versus Brandon Royval for the flyweight title. Shavkat Rakhmonov is fighting Stephen Thompson, which I think is actually kind of a... What was that?
Oh, sorry, I was just looking at the next fight on the card. Never mind.
Tony Ferguson, Paddy Pimblett. Straight out of Phil's evil brain. And Vicente Luque versus Ian Gary. I mean, it is a pretty well-rounded banger after banger kind of main card in one way or another. All quality fights, and that'll be a good one. So we hope you're looking forward to that. We hope you join us as we both preview and break that one down after the fact. And until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.